In the cold vacuum between dying stars, silence had become humanity's only companion. 17 years had passed since the last transmission from Earth. 17 years since the Quathamori armadas had descended from the void like metallic locusts, their ships blotting out suns across 100 worlds. 17 years since humanity's greatest cities had been reduced to ash in memory, their populations either dead or scattered to the furthest reaches of known space. But on Terminus Station, deep in the outer rim where nebula clouds swirled like cosmic graveyards, Captain David Cross stood before a viewport that framed the last free human settlement in the galaxy, his weathered hands pressed against the reinforced glass, watching cargo haulers drift between the station's skeletal arms like dying fireflies. Each ship carried refugees, supplies, hope measured in ration bars and recycled air. Each ship was a reminder of how far humanity had fallen. Still brooding, Captain. The voice belonged to Dr. Amara Okafor, the station's chief medical officer, and one of the few people who could speak to Cross without standing at attention. She approached with that particular grace of someone who had learned to move efficiently in artificial gravity, her dark skin bearing the telltale pallor of someone who hadn't seen natural sunlight in years. Thinking, course-corrected, not turning from the viewport. There's a difference, is there? Because from where I'm standing they look remarkably similar. Amara moved beside him, her reflection ghosting across the starfield beyond. The council meeting is in 10 minutes. You know what they're going to ask. Cross finally turned, his gray eyes carrying the weight of command decisions that had kept 30,000 souls alive in a universe that wanted them extinct. At 52 he looked older, lines carved deep by responsibility and loss, hair gone white at the temples. They're going to ask the same thing they've asked for 3 years, whether we surrender. And I'm going to give them the same answer I always do. The corridor outside Cross's observation deck hummed with the constant white noise of life support systems, the mechanical heartbeat that separated 30,000 human souls from the absolute cold of space. As they walked toward the council chambers, they passed viewports showing the station's exterior, a massive construct of salvaged ship hulls and jury-rigged habitation modules, held together by determination and engineering miracles that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Terminus Station wasn't beautiful. It wasn't elegant. It was a testament to human stubbornness, a middle finger raised to a universe that had decided humanity's time was over. The council chambers occupied what had once been the cargo bay of a destroyed dreadnought, its walls still bearing scorch marks from the battle that had claimed the ship 17 years ago. Around a circular table sat the 12 representatives of humanity's final stronghold, engineers, doctors, teachers, soldiers, people who had once been specialists in a thriving galactic civilization, and were now generalists fighting for basic survival. Council Chairman Frederick Kane rose as Cross entered. Kane had been a terraforming executive before the war, responsible for making dead worlds livable. Now he oversaw the daily miracle of keeping one space station functional. Captain, Dr. Okafor, thank you for joining us. Cross took his seat, noting the tension that crackled around the table like static electricity. Let me guess. Another surrender proposal from the Quathamori. The fourth one this month, confirmed Lieutenant Commander Rachel Stone, the station's security chief. Her military bearing hadn't softened despite years of defending refugees instead of attacking enemies. Same terms as always: complete submission, relocation to designated reservation worlds, acceptance of their oversight. Slavery, Cross said flatly. The word you're looking for is slavery. Kane cleared his throat. David, we need to be realistic about our situation. We're down to 6 months of food supplies, even with strict rationing. Our reactors holding together with spare parts and prayers. The Quathamori know where we are. They've known for months. The only reason they haven't destroyed us is because they want us to surrender voluntarily. And that doesn't tell you anything about how they operate. Cross leaned forward, his voice carrying the quiet intensity that had made him a respected commander even before the war. They don't want to break us quickly, Kane. They want to break us slowly. They want us to choose defeat because it makes their victory complete. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the station's chief engineer, spoke up from across the table. Her hands were permanently stained with coolant and machine oil, evidence of the daily battle she fought to keep their jury-rigged systems operational. The captain's right about one thing. They're playing a psychological game. But David, we can't ignore the mathematics. Even if we could somehow defeat a Katamari patrol, what then? We're still just one station against an empire that spans half the galaxy. Then we make them pay for every inch, Kors replied. We make them remember that humans don't go quietly into the dark. A new voice cut through the debate. Young, intense, carrying the particular fervor of someone who had never known the old world's peace. What if we didn't have to surrender or fight alone? All eyes turned to Communications Officer Jenny Mills, barely 25 and one of the few people on the station who had been born after the war began. She sat straight in her chair, tablet clutched in hands that trembled slightly with nervous energy. Explain, Cross said. Mills took a breath that seemed to gather courage from the recycled air itself. I've been monitoring deep space communications for months. Not just Kathmori transmissions. Human signals, encrypted, fragmented, but definitely human. There are other survivors out there, Captain. Other colonies. Other resistance cells. They're scattered, hidden, but they're fighting. The chamber fell silent except for the ever-present hum of life support. Kane was the first to speak, his voice carefully controlled. How many? I can't be certain. The signals are heavily encrypted and routed through multiple relay points. But based on transmission patterns and signal strength, Mills paused, checking her tablet again. At least 40 separate sources. Maybe more. Stone leaned forward, her soldier's instincts engaged. Any idea of their capabilities? Numbers? Resources? That's the thing, Mills continued, her excitement building. Some of these signals are coming from positions that suggest significant military assets, deep space installations, possibly even hidden fleet elements. And 3 days ago I intercepted something else. She activated the chamber's main display, showing a star chart dotted with transmission sources. A coordinated message burst. Same encryption, same time frame, broadcast from 17 different locations simultaneously. Someone's organizing the survivors. Captain. Someone's building a network. Cross studied the display, his tactical mind processing implications and possibilities. Do we know what the message said? Mills hesitated, then met his eyes directly. We broke the encryption this morning. It was a simple message, broadcast on old Earth military frequencies. The Prometheus protocol is active. All units prepare for Phase 1, humanity returns. The silence that followed was different, charged with possibility instead of resignation. Around the table, Cross could see the shift in expressions as the council processed what they'd just heard. Hope was a dangerous thing in their situation, but it was also the only thing that had kept them alive this long. Kane broke the silence. The Prometheus protocol. That's from before the war, isn't it? Old Earth contingency planning. Cross nodded slowly. Developed by Admiral Harrison specifically for the scenario we're living through now. Complete civilization collapse. Enemy occupation. Scattered resistance. Prometheus was designed to coordinate a comeback, to gather the survivors and hit the enemy when they least expected it. You think it's real? Stone asked. I mean, Harrison's been dead for 15 years. Most of the old command structure is gone. Someone's using his protocols, Cross replied. Someone who knows the old codes, the old networks. Someone who's been preparing for this moment. Dr. Okafor had been quiet throughout the exchange, but now she spoke with the careful precision of someone weighing lives against hope. Even if this is real, David, we're talking about a galaxy-spanning conspiracy. The logistics alone would be staggering. How do you coordinate that many separate groups without the Katamari noticing? Very carefully, Cross answered. And with a plan that's been 17 years in the making? Mills cleared her throat. There's something else. The message included transmission protocols for establishing contact. If we respond, we become part of the network. But Captain, she paused. The weight of her next words visible in her expression. Once we send that signal, there's no going back. The Katamari will eventually detect it, trace it back to us. We'll have to choose fight or die. Kane slumped back in his chair, the weight of 30,000 lives pressing down on his shoulders. So we're back where we started. Surrender and live as slaves, or fight and probably die. No, Cross said, standing slowly. His voice carried the authority that had kept them together through 17 years of hiding. We're not back where we started. For the first time since the war began, we have something more than survival, we have a chance. He looked around the table, meeting each council member's eyes in turn. I'm not asking anyone to make this choice lightly. We all know what we've lost, what we've sacrificed to stay free this long. But if there's even a possibility that we can take back what was stolen from us, Captain Stone interrupted, her voice soft but carrying years of military experience. What if it's a trap? What if the Kilthmori have compromised the networks, turned some of the survivors? We could be walking into an ambush. Cross considered this, then nodded acknowledgement. It's possible. Hell, it's probable they've infiltrated at least some of the resistance cells. But Rachel, ask yourself this. What's the alternative? We can hide here for another 6 months, maybe a year if we're lucky. Then what? Our reactor fails. Our food runs out, or they simply get tired of waiting and vaporize us from orbit. He moved to the viewport, looking out at the cargo haulers and refugee transports that represented humanity's last diaspora. 17 years ago, we lost our worlds, our fleets, our civilization. But we didn't lose what makes us human. We didn't lose our refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seems inevitable. Dr. Vasquez spoke up, her engineer's mind already working through practical challenges. If we're really going to do this, we need to think about capabilities. What can we actually contribute to this? Prometheus Protocol. We're not a warship, David. We're a refugee station. We're a symbol, Cross replied. 30,000 humans who refused to surrender when surrender was the logical choice. We're proof that humanity survives, and sometimes symbols are more powerful than weapons. Mills had been working on her tablet throughout the discussion, her fingers flying across tactical displays and communication protocols. Captain, I've been analyzing the transmission patterns. If I'm reading this correctly, the next coordination window opens in 6 hours. If we're going to respond, if we're going to join the network, we need to decide now, Cross finished. He turned back to the council, seeing in their faces the same mix of fear and determination that had carried them through 17 years of impossible survival. All in favor of responding to the Prometheus Protocol. The votes came slowly, each council member weighing not just their own life but the lives of every soul on the station. Dr. Okafor was first. Her medical oath to first do no harm, warring with her understanding that sometimes harm was unavoidable in service of greater healing. Her hand rose. Stone was next, her military training recognizing that sometimes retreat was just another form of attack. Her vote followed. One by one, the hands rose. Kane was last, the terraforming executive who had learned to transform not just worlds but hope itself into something habitable. When his hand finally lifted, the vote was unanimous. Cross nodded, feeling the weight of decisions settle on his shoulders like a familiar uniform. Mills, prepare the response. Use authentication protocols from before the war, something only human military personnel would know, and encrypt it with use the Lazarus frequency. Mills looked up sharply. Sir, the Lazarus frequency is theoretically impossible to decrypt without quantum processing capability that the Kilthmori don't possess, Cross finished. I know, it's why Admiral Harrison chose it for the deepest contingency protocols. Send the message. Communications officer, tell them Terminus Station stands ready. As Mills began configuring the transmission equipment, Dr. Okafor moved closer to Cross. David, you realize what we've just committed to? If this Prometheus protocol is real, if there really is a coordinated resistance forming, we're not just talking about a battle. We're talking about a war that could span decades. Cross watched the young communications officer work, her fingers dancing across quantum encryption algorithms that had been theoretical 17 years ago, and were now their only hope of secure communication. Amara, we've been at war for 17 years. The only difference is that now, for the first time, we might actually win. The transmission array came online with a subtle vibration that rippled through the station's structure. On the main display, Mills brought up the message she had crafted. A simple acknowledgement of receipt, an authentication code that proved their human origin, and a declaration that had more power than any weapon. Terminus Station operational. 30,000 souls ready to reclaim the stars. We await orders. As the message launched into the quantum foam of deep space, traveling faster than light toward coordinates that might hold hope or might hold death, Cross felt something he hadn't experienced in 17 years. The possibility of victory. But in the depths of space, other listeners were monitoring the quantum frequencies. The Kodmori had not survived for millennia by underestimating their enemies, and they had been waiting for exactly this moment, the moment when humanity's survivors revealed themselves. Admiral Korvac stood on the bridge of the dreadnought World Render, watching tactical displays that showed 37 human signals appearing across the galaxy like sparks igniting in the darkness. His forearms moved in complex patterns across holographic controls, each gesture commanding fleets that could crack planets like eggs. "So," he said in the clicking, harmonic language of his people, "the prey finally shows itself." How predictable. The trap had been 17 years in the making, and now it was about to spring closed. The response came 12 hours later, delivered through quantum channels that shouldn't have existed but somehow did, a ghost network built from the wreckage of humanity's former glory. Jenny Mills sat hunched over her communications console, her face pale in the glow of decryption algorithms that processed data streams from across the galaxy. She had been working for 6 straight hours translating the coded message that had arrived in response to their transmission, and what she found made her hands shake as she reached for the internal communications panel. "Captain Cross to communications immediately," she announced, her voice carrying through the station's corridors with an urgency that made people stop their work and listen. Cross arrived within minutes, followed by Dr. Okafor and Lieutenant Commander Stone. They found Mills staring at her primary display, where lines of decoded text scrolled past like the electronic equivalent of scripture. "Talk to me, Mills," Cross said, noting the way her shoulders tensed at the sound of his voice. "Sir," the response, "it's not what we expected." Wills turned in her chair, and Cross could see that her eyes held a mixture of awe and terror. "It's not from one source. It's from hundreds of sources, all coordinating through what they're calling the Deep Network. And they've been preparing for this moment since the day the war ended." Cross leaned over her shoulder, scanning the decoded transmission. Names he hadn't heard in 17 years scrolled past: Admiral Chen's Lost Fourth Fleet, the Sparta Defense Initiative, the Osiris Research Collective, groups that had supposedly been destroyed in the first wave of Quathmori attacks. "How many survivors are we talking about?" Stone asked, her tactical mind already calculating force strengths and strategic capabilities. Mills pulled up a tactical display that showed signal sources scattered across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. Conservative estimate: 2 million military personnel, 4 million civilians, distributed across 147 hidden installations, deep space platforms and mobile fleets. Dr. Okafor whistled softly. That's an entire civilization in hiding. How is that possible? How did they stay hidden for 17 years? "By being dead," Cross said quietly, understanding beginning to dawn in his gray eyes. That's the only way the Quathmori would stop looking for them. They had to appear completely destroyed. Mills nodded, bringing up another section of the decoded message. "According to this, Admiral Harrison didn't die when Earth fell. He escaped with a small fleet and has been building what they call the Lazarus Network. Resistance cells designed to appear destroyed while actually preparing for a coordinated counterattack. Every major defeat, every final battle. Some of our forces survived and went deep into hiding. The implications were staggering. For 17 years, while visible humanity had suffered under Quathmori occupation or fled to distant hiding places like Terminus Station, a shadow civilization had been growing in the darkness between stars. Ships had been built in hidden shipyards. Weapons had been developed in research stations disguised as space debris. An entire military infrastructure had been constructed in the shadows of defeat. "What are our orders?" Cross asked, though part of him already knew the answer. Mills highlighted a section of the message that made the hair on Cross's arms stand up. Phase 1, Revelation. All network assets will simultaneously reveal themselves and begin coordinated strikes against Quathmori occupation forces. Objective: reclaim 37 systems within 72 hours. Phase 2, Consolidation. Liberated systems will serve as staging areas for larger fleet actions. Objective: establish defensible perimeter around human space. Phase 3. Retribution. Full-scale assault on Kathmori core systems. Objective: total victory or total annihilation. Timeline: Phase 1 begins in 48 hours. All units acknowledge readiness. Stone studied the tactical implications with professional fascination. It's brilliant and completely insane. They're talking about coordinating hundreds of separate military actions across interstellar distances with split-second timing. The logistics alone are impossible, Cross finished, unless you've had 17 years to plan them. Dr. Okafor was reading a different section of the message, her medical training helping her parse technical specifications that others might miss. David, look at this. They're not just planning to hit military targets. According to this operational overview, they have detailed intelligence on every Kathmori colony, every industrial center, every population. They're planning to destroy their entire civilization. Cross felt a chill that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. Define destroy. Mills pulled up another file, one marked with security classifications he hadn't seen since before the war. The Prometheus protocol includes what they're calling terminal solutions, weapons and strategies specifically designed to cause complete species extinction. They're talking about making it impossible for the Kathmori to survive as a spacefaring civilization. The bridge fell silent except for the constant hum of life support systems. Cross stared at the display, seeing reflected in its glow not just military strategy but a fundamental question about what humanity had become after 17 years of defeat and exile. Sir, Mills said quietly, there's a personal message embedded in the transmission. It's addressed to you specifically. Cross nodded, and Mills activated a secondary display. The message that appeared was brief, written in a font that Cross recognized, military standard from before the war. David, I know what you're thinking. I know what this looks like. But remember what they took from us. Remember Earth's last transmission. Remember why we're still fighting. The old humanity is dead. What rises from its ashes will be something stronger. Harrison. Cross read the message twice, then asked Mills to delete it. But the words stayed with him, echoing in his mind like a promise and a threat combined. Captain, Stone said carefully, we need to discuss what this means for Terminus Station. If we participate in Phase 1, we're not just joining a military operation, we're signing up for genocide. Are we? Cross asked. Or are we signing up for survival? Because that's what this comes down to, Rachel. The Kathmori have made it clear that they see us as a pest species, something to be controlled or eliminated. This isn't a war between equals anymore. It's a war for the right to exist. Dr. Okafor moved to one of the viewports, looking out at the cargo haulers that carried the daily necessities of life for 30,000 souls. David, I became a doctor to save lives. All my training, all my instincts tell me that what they're proposing is wrong. But, Cross prompted. But I've also seen what the Kathmori do to human civilians, when they think no one is watching. I've treated the survivors who made it to Terminus Station. And if we don't fight now, if we don't take this chance, there won't be another one, Cross finished. They'll find all of us eventually. The hiding places will run out. The supplies will dwindle and one by one we'll be forced to surrender or die. Mills had been monitoring her communications board during their discussion, and now she looked up with an expression of controlled panic. Captain, we're receiving another transmission. Different source, different encryption. And it's Kathmori. The main display shifted to show an image that sent ice through Cross's veins. The bridge of a Kathmori dreadnought. Its occupant a towering figure in ornate armor that marked him as high nobility in their empire's hierarchy. Admiral Korpnuk's four arms moved in formal greeting patterns as he began to speak. The universal translator rendered his clicking harmonic speech into cold, precise English. Captain Cross of the Human Resistance Station designated Terminus. I am Admiral Korfin Mek of the Kathmori Imperial Navy. I have a proposition for you. Cross found his voice after a moment that felt like hours. I'm listening. Your species has impressed us with its resilience, the alien admiral continued, his compound eyes reflecting the bridge lighting like faceted jewels. 17 years of survival against impossible odds demonstrates qualities that we respect. Therefore, I offer you a choice that we have not offered to other human settlements. The camera view expanded to show tactical displays behind Corvimac, displays that showed the locations of dozens of human resistance sites, including several that Mills had just identified as part of the Lazarus network. We know about your hidden fleets, Captain Cross. We know about the Prometheus Protocol. We have been watching, waiting, allowing your Admiral Harrison to build his network, because it serves our purposes. You see, we needed to identify all the remaining resistance before we could truly end this war. Dr. Okafor stepped closer to the display, her medical training helping her read the alien's body language. He's lying about something, she whispered. The way he's holding his secondary arms, that's a deception posture in Kethmori physiology. But Cross was focused on the tactical implications. What kind of choice are you offering, Admiral? Korvac's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Quite simple. Your station contains 30,000 humans, including, we suspect, detailed records of other resistance cells and their capabilities. Surrender those records to us, and we will grant your people sanctuary on a protected reservation world. You will live. Your children will live. Your species will continue to exist, albeit in a more limited capacity. And if we refuse, then in 47 hours, when your Admiral Harrison initiates his Prometheus Protocol, you will discover that we have been preparing for this moment as long as he has. Every network node he activates will be met by our fleets. Every hidden base will be revealed and destroyed. Your final resistance will become your final extinction. The transmission ended, leaving the communications room in absolute silence. On the display, only static remained, the electronic equivalent of the void that might soon swallow the last traces of human civilization. Stone was the first to speak, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. It's a trap. The entire Lazarus network. Harrison's been compromised from the beginning. Not necessarily, Cross said, though his own voice carried doubt. Korvac could be bluffing, trying to break our resolve before we can coordinate with the others. Mills had been analyzing the transmission's technical specifications, and now she looked up with dawning horror. Captain, the signal source for that transmission. It didn't come from a distant ship. It came from inside our solar system. They're already here. The implications hit them all simultaneously. If Korvac's fleet was already in position around Terminus Station, then the 47-hour deadline wasn't about preparation time. It was about giving them long enough to watch their hopes die before they died themselves. Cross moved to the viewport, looking out at the space around their station with new eyes. The distant stars looked the same, but somewhere among them invisible ships waited with weapons that could vaporize 30,000 souls in seconds. Options, he said quietly. We could run, Stone offered without conviction. Try to evacuate the civilians, scatter them to other hiding places. 30,000 people. Dr. Okafor shook her head. Even if we had the ships, which we don't, it would take weeks to coordinate an evacuation that size. And where would they go? Every hiding place we know about has probably been compromised. Mills looked up from her console. Captain, there's another option. The Prometheus Protocol includes contingency plans for exactly this scenario: network compromise and enemy infiltration. They call it the Samson option. Cross turned from the viewport, recognizing the biblical reference. Bring down the temple on everyone's heads. More than that, Mills said, accessing files that carried the highest security classifications. If the network is compromised, if the war is lost, the Samson option activates hidden weapons that will make it impossible for anyone to control human space. Scorched earth on a galactic scale. The room fell silent as they processed the implications. The Samson option wasn't just about destroying the Kethmori. It was about making sure that if humanity couldn't have the galaxy, no one could. How long until we have to make a decision? Cross asked. Mills checked her chronometer. The next communication window with the Lazarus network opens in 6 hours. If we're going to warn them about possible compromise, we need to send our message then. Cross nodded, then looked around at his senior staff, people who had followed him through 17 years of impossible survival and were now being asked to make a choice that would determine not just their own fate but the fate of 2 entire civilizations. I want all department heads assembled in 1 hour, he said. We're going to put this to a station-wide vote. If we're going to choose between genocide and extinction, then every soul on this station gets a say. As the others left to prepare for what might be humanity's final democratic decision, Cross remained at the viewport, watching the stars that might soon become graveyards for two species locked in a war that neither could afford to lose. In the depths of space, Admiral Korvac Smak watched his own tactical displays, where human resistance sites glowed like targets waiting to be eliminated. But hidden in the corner of his strategic overview was another display, one that showed weapon signatures his own people didn't recognize. Energy patterns that suggested humanity's final desperation might be more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. The trap was set, but perhaps, Korvac thought with something approaching respect, the prey had set a trap of its own. The vote took 3 hours. 30,000 souls, from children barely old enough to understand the concept of death to elderly survivors who remembered Earth's blue skies, cast their ballots on terminals throughout Terminus Station. They voted on the future of their species, on the meaning of survival itself, on whether humanity's final chapter would be written in surrender or written in flame. Captain Cross stood in the central observation deck, watching the results compile on displays that had once shown shipping manifests and now showed the democratic death throes of human civilization. Dr. Okafor stood beside him, her hands steady despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. 74% in favor of the Samson option, Mills reported from her communications station. 18% for surrender to Corfamex's terms. 8% abstain. Cross nodded, feeling the weight of that decision settle into his bones. Send the warning to the Lazarus Network. Tell Harrison that the Kothomori know everything, that the trap is already set, and tell him, Cross paused, choosing his next words carefully, tell him that Terminus Station stands ready to light the fire. As Mills began encoding the transmission that would warn humanity's hidden fleets about the trap they were flying into, Cross activated the station-wide communication system. His voice echoed through corridors and chambers where 30,000 people waited to learn their fate. Citizens of Terminus Station. 17 years ago, we made a choice to remain free rather than live as slaves. Today, we make another choice to ensure that if humanity dies, it dies on its own terms. In 6 hours, we will activate protocols that will deny our enemies the victory they seek. We will show them that some defeats are more costly than victories. He paused, looking out at the cargo haulers and refugee transports that represented everything they had tried to preserve. I know this is not the ending we hoped for when we first came to this place, but perhaps it is the ending we deserved, not as victims but as a species that refused to yield even when yield was the only rational choice. As his words faded into the station's background noise, Cross turned to find Stone approaching with a tactical assessment that would determine how their final hours played out. Captain, I've been analyzing our defensive capabilities, she reported. We've got the mining laser arrays, some improvised missile launchers, and about 200 personal weapons scattered throughout the station. Against a Kothomori dreadnought, will last about 30 seconds, Cross finished. I know, but Rachel, we're not trying to win a battle. We're trying to buy time for the Samson option to activate. Mills looked up from her console. Speaking of which, Captain, I've established contact with the network command structure. Admiral Harrison is requesting direct communication with you. Cross nodded, and the main display shifted to show a face he hadn't seen in 17 years older now. Scarred by combat and command decisions, but unmistakably the officer who had once commanded humanity's greatest fleets. David, Harrison said, his voice carrying across the quantum foam with crystal clarity. I got your warning, and I have some news of my own. Good news or bad news? Cross asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Both. The bad news is that you're right, the Kothomori have been monitoring our communications for months. They know about most of our installations, most of our fleet positions. When Phase 1 begins, we'll be flying into prepared kill zones. Cross felt his heart sink, but Harrison wasn't finished. The good news is that we've been monitoring them right back. And David, we know where their core worlds are. We know where their imperial family resides. We know the location of every major population center in Kothomori space. The implications were staggering. Cross leaned forward, studying Harrison's expression for any sign of uncertainty. You're talking about attacking their homeworlds directly. I'm talking about ending this war in a way that ensures it never happens again, Harrison replied. The Samson option isn't just about destroying human space to deny it to the enemy. It's about using that destruction as cover for a final strike that will cripple the Quathamori Empire permanently. Dr. Okafor stepped into the communication field. Admiral Harrison, I'm Dr. Amara Okafor, Chief Medical Officer for Terminus Station. What you're describing, how many Quathamori civilians would die in such an attack? Harrison's expression hardened. Doctor, how many human civilians died when they glassed Earth? How many died in the labor camps on their industrial worlds? We're not talking about justice anymore. We're talking about species survival. Cross studied the tactical implications, his command training helping him see the strategic picture that Harrison was painting. What do you need from us, Admiral? Terminus Station's position in the Outer Rim makes it an ideal staging point for deep space operations. We need you to hold your position until our strike forces can reach you. Then your station becomes the coordination hub for the final attack. Mills had been monitoring other communication channels during the conversation, and now she looked up with alarm. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Multiple Quathamori ships decloaking. The main display shifted to show tactical sensors revealing the trap that had been waiting for them. 12 Quathamori warships, each the size of a city, had been hiding in the system's outer reaches. As Cross watched, they began moving toward Terminus Station with the inexorable patience of hunters who knew their prey had nowhere to run. Admiral Cross said, his voice steady despite the situation, we may not have as much time as we thought. Harrison's image nodded grimly. Understood. David, I'm transmitting the Samson activation codes to your station now. If you can't hold your position, if the Quathamori overwhelm your defenses, we'll make sure they pay for the privilege, Cross promised. The transmission ended, leaving Cross and his senior staff staring at tactical displays that showed their certain doom approaching at a significant fraction of light speed. The Quathamori fleet would reach Terminus Station in 4 hours. Orders, Captain, Stone asked, her military bearing intact despite the hopelessness of their situation. Cross studied the displays, noting the formation patterns of the approaching ships. Something about their deployment didn't quite match standard Quathamori tactics. They were moving too carefully, too precisely, as if they were trying to preserve something rather than simply destroy it. They want us alive, he realized. Or at least they want our databases intact. That's why they're approaching so cautiously. Mills had been analyzing the Samson option activation codes that Harrison had transmitted, and now she looked up with an expression that mixed awe and terror. Captain, I understand now why they call it the Samson option. These aren't just weapons, they're reality-altering devices. When they activate, they'll collapse the quantum structure of space-time itself across a radius of… across a radius of 50 light-years. Dr. Okafor stared at the specifications. That would destroy everything in the affected area. Not just ships, not just planets. The very fabric of space itself would become uninhabitable, making it impossible for anyone to control those systems, Cross said. Scorched universe tactics. If we can't have it, nobody can. Stone was studying the tactical situation with professional fascination. Captain, if we're going to activate these devices, we need to coordinate with other Samson option sites. The effect needs to be simultaneous across multiple systems to prevent the Quathamori from simply retreating to safe areas. Cross nodded, then made a decision that would echo across the galaxy. Mills, open a channel to all human resistance sites. Use the deepest encryption we have. It's time to let everyone know what we're really fighting for. As the communications array powered up for what might be humanity's final broadcast, Cross looked out at the approaching Quathamori fleet and felt something he hadn't experienced in 17 years. Not hope exactly, but something deeper. A sense that regardless of the outcome, humanity would be remembered not for how it died, but for how it chose to die. The transmission reached every human outpost, every hidden fleet, every resistance cell scattered across the galaxy. This is Captain David Cross of Terminus Station. In 3 hours, the Samson option will activate across 37 star systems. The Quathamori Empire will lose approximately 40% of their territory and 60% of their industrial base. They will survive as a species, but they will never again have the capacity to threaten other civilizations. Cross paused, watching on his displays as the message reached its destinations and responses began flooding back. Acknowledgements from places he had thought were dead, confirmations from fleets he hadn't known existed. To my fellow humans, scattered across the darkness, we did not choose this war, but we will choose how it ends. We will show the universe that some prices are too high to pay, some victories too costly to achieve. We will ensure that when future species look at the ruins of our civilization, they will understand that humanity preferred extinction to surrender. The responses kept coming from mining stations in asteroid belts, from research vessels in distant nebulae, from colony ships that had been fleeing for 17 years. Each message carried the same confirmation. The Samson option was active, the devices were armed, and humanity's final gambit was ready to play. On the bridge of the World Render, Admiral Korvadermuk watched his own displays with growing concern. The human resistance had been more extensive than even his intelligence services had suspected, and the energy signatures now appearing throughout the galaxy suggested weapons capabilities that challenged everything his people understood about physics. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "we're detecting quantum disruption patterns from 37 different systems. Whatever the humans are preparing, it's beyond our current understanding of weapon technology." Korvac's forearms moved in complex patterns across his control systems, accessing files that contained his species' deepest strategic assessments. For millennia, the Corvan Roy had survived by being the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. The possibility that humanity, a species they had considered primitively aggressive but fundamentally inferior, might possess weapons that exceeded their own capabilities was one they had never seriously considered. "Time to reach the human station?" he asked. "2 hours, Admiral. But sir, if we proceed with the assault while these quantum signatures are active, we risk triggering a chain reaction that could destabilize space-time itself," Korvax finished. He studied the tactical situation, weighing species survival against military victory. "Signal the fleet, maintain position but do not approach the human installation, and prepare a transmission to their Captain Cross." Back on Terminus Station, Mills detected the incoming Quathmori communication and nodded to Cross. The main display showed Admiral Korvac, but his bearing had changed. Less predatory confidence, more cautious respect. "Captain Cross," the alien admiral began, "our sensors indicate that your species has developed weapons of unprecedented destructive capability. We may have misjudged the strategic balance of this conflict." Cross leaned forward, noting the subtle change in Korvac's posture, a shift from dominance display to negotiation stance. "Are you proposing terms, Admiral?" "I am proposing survival," Korvac replied. "For both our species. The devices you have prepared would not only destroy our presence in the affected systems, they would render those regions of space uninhabitable for millions of years. The cost of victory would exceed its value." Dr. Okafor stepped into the communication field. "Admiral, what are you offering?" Korvac's compound eyes shifted to focus on her, and Cross could see alien intelligence reassessing everything it thought it knew about human capabilities and intentions. "Complete withdrawal from human space," the Admiral said finally. "Reparations for the damage inflicted during our occupation. Recognition of humanity as a sovereign species with full rights under galactic law. In exchange, you deactivate these weapons and agree to limited territorial boundaries." The silence that followed was broken only by the hum of life support systems and the distant vibration of ships that carried the power to reshape the galaxy. Cross looked around at his senior staff, seeing in their faces the same mixture of exhaustion and determination that had carried them through 17 years of impossible survival. They had voted for extinction rather than surrender, had chosen to light a fire that would consume friend and enemy alike, but now they were being offered something they had never expected to see again: a future. "Admiral," Cross said finally, "I need to consult with my people, and with the other resistance sites. This decision affects more than just Terminus Station." "Understood," Korvac replied. "But Captain, the quantum instabilities your weapons are generating are already affecting space-time in the target systems. If they activate, the damage will be irreversible. You have 1 hour to decide." The transmission ended, leaving Cross staring at tactical displays that showed the galaxy balanced on the edge of transformation. In 1 hour, Humanity would either reclaim its place among the stars or ensure that the stars themselves would remember its passing. Mills looked up from her communications console. "Captain, I'm receiving responses from the other Samson option sites. They're all asking the same question. Do we trust the Quethmori to honor an agreement they're making under duress?" Cross moved to the viewport, looking out at the space between stars where two civilizations had learned to measure survival in increments of absolute destruction. "No," he said finally. "We don't trust them. But maybe trust isn't what this is about anymore." He turned back to his staff, seeing in their faces the reflection of a choice that would echo through galactic history. Maybe this is about proving that even at the edge of extinction, humanity can choose wisdom over vengeance. Maybe this is about showing the universe that we're not just good at destroying things, we're good at knowing when to stop. As Cross prepared to make the decision that would determine whether the galaxy emerged from this conflict transformed or simply scarred, he thought about the 30,000 souls on his station, about the millions of humans scattered across the darkness, about the choice between the justice of absolute victory and the wisdom of imperfect peace. In 1 hour they would all discover what humanity truly valued more: the satisfaction of perfect revenge, or the possibility of a future where their children might see stars that hadn't been twisted into graveyards. The countdown continued, each second carrying the weight of two civilizations' survival, each moment a choice between fire and hope in the darkness between dying stars.